By the end of this video, it will be up to you to decide whether or not this was a case of premeditated suicide or premeditated murder. But before we continue, please click the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, thank you in advance. Richard Okorogheye was a 19-year-old boy who went missing from his home in Ladbroke Grove, West London on the 22nd of March 2021. According to his mother evidence, when she came back from work, she thought Richard was in his room as usual. It was after she had made his favorite food for dinner that she went to check up on him, to call him to come down and eat, only to realize that he was not in his room. After several attempts to reach him on the phone and he wasn't picking up, the mother decided to involve the police, who at first did not take it seriously because they thought maybe he was going to come back. But when he didn't come back, they realized that this was a case of a missing person. And soon they began a search party for him, but it would take 2 weeks to find Richard. Unfortunately, he would not be found alive. His body was discovered floating in a pond at Epping Forest, Essex, 20 miles away from Richard's home. And the big question is, how? How did this 19-year-old boy vanish from his bedroom, nearly 2 hours away from his home, into a lake in a forest? Was he lured by someone, or did he just decide that it was time to take a walk? Richard's mother strongly believes that her son was lured in by someone and killed by that person. Even though when his body was found, the police said that there wasn't any sign of injury or any mark that would indicate someone had done something to him. The police themselves ruled out the possibility of a third party involved. But the reason Richard's mother believes that her son was lured in by someone was the fact that Richard had been developing a friendship with someone online. Now let's get this context clear. Richard was known to be sickle cell anemic, and at the time of his disappearance, the whole world was on lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. So it had been nearly a whole year since the lockdown took effect. And Richard, who already had a compromised immune system due to his sickle cell, had to isolate himself twice as hard as anyone else. I mean, if people were limited to their compounds and houses, Richard was mostly limited to his bedroom because his mother had to go to work. Even with his mother, he had to be careful to how much he came in contact with her because, well, there was a pandemic. The only time Richard left the house was whenever he wanted to see the doctor for his blood transfusion. And after that, he was back home, locked indoors in his bedroom, all in a bid not to catch the coronavirus. Now that that context is clear, it becomes safe to see how Richard began to make friends online. I'm not sure the particular video game the mother said he was meeting friends through, but there is this style of video game these days that these children play with their PlayStation that allows them to communicate with whomever they were playing with, no matter how far they were. So I'm guessing this is the nature in which Richard made his friends. And so the mother assumed that this was a friend Richard had gone to see 20 miles away from his home, who eventually might have killed him. Another piece of evidence that might slightly support the fact that the mother believes someone had lured him to his death was the fact that when he left home, he did not leave with the most important things. According to what was said, his wallet, bank card, jacket, even his bus pass were left behind in his room. I mean, if you would leave all these important things in the house, you might as well be taking a walk just to get a burger down the street. You just can't leave your bus pass and ATM card and even your jacket just to travel 20 miles away from your house. So I still don't even know how this helps the case that someone lured him. Maybe he didn't know that the person was living far, or maybe with every 2 steps he took, the person told him, oh, that's not where I stay, come further, that's not where I stay, move further. Sort of like a drag. I still don't understand how that helps the belief that someone lured him in. But you know, maybe that might be something. Maybe he might have thought that whomever he was going to see didn't live far. Or maybe he knew where he was going and he knew he wouldn't be needing all these things that he left behind because he wasn't coming back home. When Richard was reported missing, his friends were asked, and none of them said they had seen him. And of course, they began to reach him through his phone, and he wasn't taking his calls. The police had his laptops, and they were able to contact his network provider to track his phone and see if there was any unusual activity. And according to the police, throughout the 2 weeks they were searching for him, there wasn't any unusual activities in his phone or his computer. But when they checked CCTV footages, that was when they spotted him coming out of a store he might have gone to buy a snack, and then they established that he entered a bus that took him west or south. But the next time they saw him, and the last time CCTV footage caught him, was when he came out from a taxi at London in Essex at 12:39 a.m. on the 23rd of March wearing an all black and carrying a small bag heading towards Epping Forest. Now take note of the bag, it's going to be important in a moment. It was through the CCTV footage that the police thought that they were going to check Epping Forest and see maybe he was there. On the 31st of March 2021, the search for Richard Okorogheye began at Epping Forest, but it would take a whole 2 weeks till his body would be found at a pond in that forest. And like I've already explained, when his body was found at the pond, the police could not establish any physical trauma that suggests the possibility of a third-party involvement. There was no gunshot wounds, there was no stab wounds, there was no strangulation marks. There was nothing to indicate that he was in a struggle with anyone or he was in a fight with anyone or, anything at all. And so they ruled his death as unexplained. But is it really unexplained? Is it possible that he drowned himself? Well, if he actually died from drowning, I guess the autopsy would have been able to spot it out and say what it was. But since his death was ruled as unexplained, I'm guessing maybe he didn't die of drowning. Although I don't know how the autopsy works, but if it read unexplained, he probably didn't die of drowning. So how did he die? Was he lured there and killed in a very mysterious manner, or did he do it himself? Let's look at all the available facts. In this case, that might prove that Richard knew exactly what he was doing and knew exactly how it was all going to end. Now, this boy have been on lockdown for almost an entire year like every other person, and due to his own condition, clearly he was going to be in a very, very severe isolation. Even his mother admitted that her son was struggling to cope mentally with the lockdown and his own personal condition. This was taking a toll on him, and the mother admitted that. So it is safe to say Richard was depressed. And if he was depressed or coping mentally with the whole situation, isn't that all the answers we need to this case? I mean, it's surprising to see that the mother would think someone lured him to his death, even knowing the fact that her son is actually struggling mentally. So basically, if he was struggling mentally, I feel that that is all the answers that we need. But let's move on to see if there is any chance that this could be bigger than just him being depressed. Now, part of the things that Richard did not leave the house with, along with his wallet, his bus pass, his bank card, his jacket, was also his medication. As a sickle cell anemic person, this guy relied on daily medications to survive. There were drugs he needed to take every day just to ease the pain of whatever he was going through. Yet, the day he left the house, he did not leave with those medications. Richard knew how fatal it would be for him without those medications, yet he chose to still leave the house without them. And of course, he would need a jacket for the weather, and he still left the house without a jacket. I mean, for the mother to point out that this boy left his house without a jacket, for it to be written on the articles that he left his house without his jacket, it is clear that that jacket was of importance to him. But still, he chose not to live with it. He traveled 20 miles away from his house without his medication and without his jacket. And some people might argue maybe he didn't want to carry a lot of load, maybe he was going somewhere he didn't think was going to be far, or maybe he thought he was going to come back that same day. But he was with a bag. Remember the bag that the CCTV caught him with? He had a bag with him, and that satchel bag could contain his medications, his wallet, at least his bank cards. So if he had a space on him to carry these important things and still chose not to, what does that say? Another thing that he chose not to do was take his calls. I mean, one may argue that they were trying to call him and he wasn't picking his phone because his phone was not close to him or because someone had stolen his phone. But the CCTV camera caught him with his phone the last time they saw him heading towards Epping Forest at 12 midnight the next day after the 22nd. You can't tell me that within that 22nd and 23rd that his mother did not try to call him or his friends did not try to text him. If he was with his phone, the calls came. He saw the calls but chose not to take those calls. The least he could do was take the call, or the least he could do was text back and tell them where he was. But this was a boy who saw the calls and still chose not to answer the calls. There were a lot of decisions that he chose not to make that would have been helpful to keeping him alive or knowing his whereabouts, yet he chose not to make them. So, was this a boy lured 20 miles away from his home by a total stranger only to be murdered in an unexplainable manner? Or was this a boy who had had enough, who was fed up with his depression, fed up with his condition and the intensity of the isolation brought in by the lockdown, and decided that maybe it was time to live free for once? Maybe he went into the forest and decided not to fight anymore, decided not to take medications anymore, and let his natural depreciating health take its course. Could that be the reason? Could that be what happened to Richard? The death of Richard Okorogheye is a very sad incident, one that is still unexplained up till now. However, this is the story and this is all the evidence that have been reported and printed in articles. So, what do you think? Do you think this was a premeditated murder? Or do you think this was a boy who was tired of fighting to stay alive? Let me know what you think. Meanwhile, thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to leave a comment to let me know what your thoughts are regarding the Richard Okorogheye's case. And if you haven't subscribed, please do well to click the subscribe button and also turn on the notification button so that you will be notified whenever there is a new video. Thank you for watching.